Hello everyone, this is Daniel Fosco. I'm Senior Product Designer on the Release Group on GitLab, and this video is part 2 of the UX Scorecard for the compliance team, where Austin asked me to create audit deliverables. So for quick context, all the links to these will be shared, but this is part 2 of this scorecard. In part 1 a while back, I went through the whole workflow to create audit deliverables and shared that video as well. You can also watch it. This is a shorter one just to share summarized results of that workflow that I completed, and all of that is here in this mural. So let's go over it. Starting here in the beginning, there's this line that is a loose interpretation of what felt productive during the workflow. In the beginning, I had to find the SOX enabled project to export my audit deliverables. That was pretty easy with these SOX badges in the projects. Maybe it would have been so easy if all of them were SOX enabled, because then I would have to know which ones I had to look for. But since this was a test scenario with only 2, I figured these were the right ones, and I think that's the case. So good first step, pointed me in the right direction. Finding the actual page wasn't so easy. After a couple of looks, audit events seemed to be what was right, and indeed it was the right page to go to. But there's quite a few concepts and labels within security that could match what I wanted to do. So yeah, that wasn't so easy, but I got there. Then understanding the page and basically understanding the structure of these audit events. The link to the documentation was really good. This documentation was really relevant to what I was looking for. Kind of weird that it's not in docs.gitlab.com, but you know, it did the job really well. So that was pretty handy. Then I jumped to finding the correct audit events and playing around with the search and the filters. And once I was happy with that, although filtering it is a bit basic, but I decided, you know what, all of these seem relevant to what I want mostly, so let me just export them all. That's where it got tricky, because I couldn't find where to export. The documentation pointed to me pretty easily where to. I just Control F export and found the option. But I found it a little bit weird that me as a user who has the permissions to do this, and I can see the data here, have to go elsewhere to export the data. So essentially I have to go to the admin area to export that data. Sorry. But yeah, it was a little bit confusing. Eventually I got there in the admin part. The navigation structure wasn't the same. So here, for example, on GitLab, you have the monitor section, but then you have the monitoring option here in the admin, and within monitoring, you have audit events. So the navigation structure is pretty different, and the same icon is being used for different things. That's less than ideal, but the documentation pointed exactly there, so I found it. Once we got there, really good result. The page was pretty much the same, which is odd. The only difference was export as CSV was available as an option there. So that's what I did. Exported the CSV, and then proceeded to, before that then, I had a little bit of trouble with the date picker. You can see here, maybe it's a little blurry, but pretty much every option the date picker is grayed out. So it wasn't very clear to me what was available as a date and what was not. If I understood it correctly, you can only select 1 month into the past, but that wasn't made clear anywhere in copy, or the UI itself also didn't help that I could only select 1 month. So it wasn't entirely clear which options I had related to the date picker. And we can see here in this user journey timeline that in the beginning, little bit of confusion on finding the page, but for the most part, I was feeling really productive. When I reached this point where there was no button to export the audit files, I was a little bit, wait, what? Like I'm in the right place, I know I am. And went down a little bit, but then finding the option again and being able to export it, bring it back up. Sorry. Then understanding what to export. Then, okay, I made my peace with the date picker, selected the dates that seem relevant, and exported the data. And then we go into the last part where I got everything I wanted from GitLab. GitLab, here's the audit events, here's your CSV, go crazy. But then what happened was the CSV had more data than what I needed, right? The scenario asked me to one, find audit events for users that have been added and removed and their permissions, and any failure to maintain separation of duties, and if there are, what were they? The first one is more or less clear, I would say. I was just looking for users added, user removed, access level for user has been changed. So I consider this relatively easy to interpret. Even though I would like to be able to just filter this in the UI before exporting, right? So give me more than an event action type, perhaps, where I can filter by, I want everything user access related, and you export me that. Not sure if that kind of granularity is possible, but it would have saved me some time in Google Spreadsheets for sure. The second part, maintain separation of duties, was a bit trickier because that in itself, separation of duties, is a concept that can mean many things, and the scenario didn't define the concept, I assume on purpose, but GitLab as an application also didn't. So I think as a compliance manager, which is the persona for this job, I would have known that, but maybe, I'm an intern, or maybe I used to work in a completely different context and now I'm working with GitLab. So I don't really know what that is. And it required a lot of interpretation from my side to understand which one of these actually meant separation of duties was breached. And that was, I would say, almost half or a third of my time in this workflow, just figuring out, going into the docs, finding the features that relate to these actions, finding the documentation, the user type permissions that map to these actions, because separation of duties, in my perspective, means that a user has not done something that is not within their realm of responsibilities and permissions, right? So it's a mixture of the action you took and the permissions you have, but also what is your user type, or what is your user role. So there's a little bit of like a bunch of moving parts that are interconnected, and I had to interpret them all, and did so to the best of my abilities. But I definitely finished the workflow knowing that I was done, but not being entirely sure if I had the right document, the right information in my document, in my export, which obviously from the perspective of compliance and audits is not ideal. But then again, I wonder to which extent this is just a part of me not really being a compliance manager and lacking the base concepts for that. But take a look at the document as a whole. There's much more detailed information here, but essentially the act of exporting the documentation and finding what to export was fairly easy. I felt fairly competent doing so. When it came to making sure that the export had just the right information that I needed, not so much, and I wish GitLab would help me a little bit more with that if possible. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.